Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. Our guest today is Lucas Root. We're going to talk about community. I want to welcome you to the show, Lucas.
Thank you very much for having me, Alicia.
Let's start by telling our listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, so they have a frame of reference for this conversation that we're going to be having today.
Cool. Yes, please. I'm a business strategy consultant. I work with brands who don't execute. A great example, well, the way that we get to that, what that kind of means is if you look at like the really, really big companies out there, you'll notice that they sort of fit into two different grooves. On the one side, you have companies like Amazon and Google, where they do everything, 100% of everything in-house. I mean, Google even built their own operating system for their computers. So if that tells you what level of everything they're willing to do. And it's a great example. And people spend a lot of time and effort talking about the Amazons and Googles of the world because it's exciting and fun. And, there's a lot to talk about. And then really, truly in the biggest companies spectrum, there's a whole other groove of companies that do things very, very, dramatically, vastly different from that. And this is when they, rather than looking at themselves as like a conglomerate or a company, they look at themselves as a brand and they get super deeply focused at one or two things. And they try to just sort of tune out everything that's not that one or two things. So the Apple company is a perfect example of that, where they're a design company. They're their focus is so deep on design. They actually came out with in 2018. They talked about why they had chosen not to try to keep up with the expanding, cell phone market. Like they were like, we've decided that we're going to actually keep our iPhone at a specific size because we think it's the perfect size. Whether they're right or not is not really the question here. They think it's the perfect size. And that level of detail, that level of focus and design is just amazing. And so all of the other things that have to happen in order for them to be successful are outside. It's something that needs to be done by somebody else, some external service provider, a vendor or something. And that's where I come in. Companies like the Apple company, in fact, my largest and best known client is the Pokemon company, which is another great example of that, but not my only client. They hire me to help them bridge that gap, to help them line up service providers, to make sure that they have business models that are going to work, make sure that they have all of the pieces in place to actually succeed as a company.
Fascinating. So now, we're talking about some really big names.
Yeah.
And we started out by briefly mentioning community. And I'd love to get into how this all starts to fit together. So I know this is your movement. This is your message. This is what you are really putting out into the world. Let's talk about that.
I would love to. Thank you. It is my movement. It is my message. How many times a day do you hear the word community?
Oh, geez, I don't even know, to be honest with you. I'm sure it varies from day to day, but I would say most days, I don't think I hear that word. Mm-hmm. Unless, you're in a conversation, you're talking about, your community on social media, or, in like these little, contexts.
Yep, I agree. That's the way it was for me too. And I started to wonder, is the fact that I have, this many thousands of followers, is that actually a community? Like, I grew up in northern Vermont. I grew up way in the backwoods. Where I grew up, people paid attention to the neighbors that they had around. It wasn't just a neighborhood. It was something more than that, maybe. If I was off getting in trouble in the woods and somebody noticed it, they'd call my parents and let them know, not to tattle on me, but because they cared. And that nuance, not to tattle on me, but because they cared, that nuance is actually really, really important. And as I became an adult, I moved away from that. I moved to New York City. I worked on Wall Street for 17 years. And Wall Street has a community of sorts of its own, but it was something that I didn't mesh with. And so I was, for a period of time, I was bereft of community. I didn't have people around me that cared whether or not I woke up. I didn't have people around me that would call my wife and let them know that I was out on a drunken rager, you know. Not that that happened often, but you know, that's an important thing to notice in people around you, or you know, to notice in yourself. I didn't know that I was missing it, and that's equally important. Why didn't I know that I was missing it? Like, you know, if I didn't have clothes, I think I'd notice that. If I didn't have shoes or food, I think I would notice that. Why didn't I know that I was missing community? And those questions and that sort of mental exploration, that conversation that I'm having with myself, even now, I think it's more important than people give it credit. I think it's more important than people give it thought. And that's what I'm trying to help people see, is that community actually matters a lot. And the lack of community in our lives matter a lot. And so here's what I'd like to propose. I'd like to propose that we all start thinking about community, that having tens of thousands of followers is not community. And even if some of them from time to time send you loves or claps or likes or, 17 emojis in the comments, it's still not actually community. It's two one-way conversations happening at the same time. Think about that in terms of playing catch. If two one-way conversations are happening at the same time while you're playing catch, someone's going to get hit in the face with a ball. And I would like to see more people actually playing catch and less people getting hit in the face with a ball. A lot of metaphors.
A lot of metaphors, but it drives the point home. And there are a lot of people, especially business owners, who feel incredibly lonely, who don't have a supportive community. And I know when I started working, because I've been working with clients now for over a decade. I remember some of my first clients who were very successful business owners of companies that were, making multi-million dollars a year in revenue. And I started to notice that the higher their level of income, the higher the level of status, the more they started to kind of pull away from a lot of other people. And they still had their family, they had their wife or their husband or whoever, and they had their kids, but all of the stuff that they were going through internally was becoming more and more repressed, more and more secretive. Like the external facade, right, could not show any of these imperfections. And in many cases, they were living with these things. And it was largely because they didn't have a community of like-minded people to say, hey, you're normal. This is okay. It doesn't have to be this way. Mm-hmm. So when people would come into my world, it would be like, finally, a breath of fresh air. I can actually, like, somebody understands what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. And now, fast forward to today, where I'm in a lot of different groups. I'm in masterminds and I'm in high level networking groups and things like that. And I've started to recognize that I was actually falling into that pattern as well before I started to get myself into these communities of like-minded people who were helping to lift one another up and support. And that's what you were saying too. It's not about your neighbors tattling on you. It's about the fact that they care about you. And we all need to feel like people care about us.
Yeah, we do. So I have some driving questions myself that kick this off. The first is this. We are humans, we're a predator animal. We have eyes on the front of our head. And for land animals, that is 100% a biological key that we're a predator animal. But it's confusing because we look in the mirror every single day. And what we don't see are fangs, huge teeth that make it easy for us to hunt and kill, or claws the same way. We don't have incredibly high muscle density. We're not particularly fast sprinters. We don't have any of the other markers of predator. We just have these eyes in the front of our heads. And it's confusing. So how did we successfully hunt and kill animals to eat? Because I know that if I'm not particularly fast and I don't have fangs or claws, my guess is that I myself am not going to be going out and hunting down a buffalo and killing it. The only way that's happening is through teamwork, community. And so one of those driving questions for me was, if we don't have community, what does that actually mean to us in terms of our biological needs? Because everybody's familiar with Maslow's, right? Maslow says food, water, and security are your basic needs. Well, how do we get food if we don't have community? The answer is we don't.
Yeah, so true.
So from an absolutely basic needs perspective, if I don't have a community that cares about me and I know it, what that means is that my existence in the world today, right now in this world that is so overconnected, it's ridiculous. I have had 2 phone calls while we're on this podcast. Now, my phone's on vibrate, so it's not interrupting us, but the world is so overconnected that I'm talking to you and I have 2 other people trying to talk to me. And yet, community is so scarce that you said most days it's a word that doesn't even come into your day. Does that mean that by definition we are insecure most of the time? Like insecure. And think about what that means. If we are insecure because of the fact that we don't have community, then how are we acting in the world? How are we reacting to the world? How is it that each time a thing comes to us and happens to us, and we can look this stuff up in psychology and take a look at what that means. Like if we have a basic insecurity, the lack of community, if we have a basic insecurity, it changes who we are to the world. So that's number one, the first question. And the second question is, all right, so fine, Lucas, I hear you, I get it. Community is kind of important. What is it? What is community? How do I know that I'm a member of a community? I've got my group of friends. Is that a community? And so I started thinking about it. I have engineering training. I never actually practiced, but I studied engineering in college. I think about the world from a sort of foundational, build it up perspective. And so I started thinking about what is a community, so I can answer that question. Lucas, what is a community? It's not just a group of people. We have 2 different words for that for a reason. Community means something different than group. And I think I have an answer, and I think it's a pretty good answer.
Well, let's hear it.
Yeah. I think that there are 5 elements of community, and all 5 of these elements need to be present in order for a group to have become a community. The first is that they have to have a common language, and that's not just English. It's the way that they speak is unique. It could be understood by people outside, but it's unique. It makes communication easy and smooth inside the community. The words that they choose, the rhythm. You might notice that if you go over to the UK and spend a week there, you're going to start to pick up a little bit of the accent. You spend another week, you'll pick up a little bit more of the accent. I think that that's a natural adaptation to our need to be in a community, because the way that we speak in a community is unique, even inside of the language we choose to use. So common language is the first element. The second element is a common purpose. The community, as a community, needs to have a purpose. We need to be working towards something. There's something that we all agree is important to us. And in fact, we commune, we congregate around that purpose. Doesn't really matter what that purpose is, except to the community. Functionally speaking, any purpose will do, right? But that community needs to have a purpose. Could be, we all want to learn how to be more profitable as business owners. It could be, we're a whole bunch of local people that didn't get enough hugs from our parents, and we meet every week to get hugs. It's not really important what the purpose is, but it has to have a purpose, and it has to be communicated and agreed upon and understood. So language, purpose, common value, which is different from values, right? We're not talking about leadership and security and blah, blah, blah. We're talking about the value that you receive for being a member in that community. You know the saying, membership has its perks. Well, this is that common value. Membership has its perks. And again, doesn't really matter what those perks are, functionally speaking. It matters to the community, but functionally, it's not important. So common value. And then there must be common projects. So if purpose is where we're going, projects are how we get there. And in order to be in the community, you actually have to participate in the projects. You have to show up alongside the other community members, and you have to sweat together. Doesn't necessarily have to be physical sweat. Although that works and it helps. And then finally, what I'm calling common heart. And that describes this, this understanding that's agreed upon across the entire community, that everybody is showing up with the intent and commitment to do the right thing. It's bi-directional enrollment. It's that thing where I said, the parents would call my parents and tell them that I was getting into trouble, not to tattle, but because they care. That's that part, Did I show up to work? My boss doesn't call me because he wants profit. My boss calls me because he actually cares. My coworker calls me because they care. My wife calls me because she cares.
So this has got the gears turning in my mind. And I can see how valuable this is in all of these different really important areas of our life, in our families, in our businesses, with our friends, if you are participating in hobbies that you're passionate about, and seeing how much richer life is when you have this in these different areas of your life. And I would bet that there's probably a lot of people listening right now who are thinking to themselves, I don't have this in my business. I don't have this with my employees or my team members. I don't have this with my friends. I don't have this with even my spouse or, whatever it might be. And awareness is like the first step, right? So then what are you guiding people to do when they become aware that there is this deficit?
Yeah. The first thing to do is pay attention to what you're doing to drive community away from you. I was driving community away from myself. You got to take responsibility for the place that you are in life and for the role that you played in getting yourself there. And sometimes that means, accepting a hard truth. So what is it that you're doing to drive this away? Because if I'm right, and maybe I'm wrong, and look, if I'm wrong, I will accept it. Please reach out and let me know. But if I'm right, and community is a basic need, it's at the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy, even though that's not where he put it. I'm taking a stand here and saying he's wrong. It's at the bottom.
You heard it here.
Heard it here. That is foundational need for us. If I'm right, then you're driving it away if you don't have it, because everybody around you wants it. Everybody around you is craving it. And maybe they're also driving it away too, right? So it takes two to fight. It takes two to tango. It takes two to love. And what is the role that you're playing in your successful communities and or in your lack of community? So that's number one. Number two, again, the people around you want it. and start looking for ways to supplement your relationships with these elements. Show people that you have the intent and commitment to do the right thing. Show people that you want to show up and sweat alongside them because their projects are important to you. Show people that there is a purpose that we all can work towards together. And these are the purposes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 10 that are important to you. And let's find a way that we can work together on one of them, right? Show people that you are interested in sharing common language with them. Not stop it, Alicia, you're using that word wrong. This is how we use it. But the opposite. Oh, that's how you use that word. Let me try.
Now, I'm hoping that you've inspired a few people, maybe more, to be a bit more mindful about the role that community can play in their lives, in their businesses, because it is valuable. And now I'm going to shift gears because I have to ask you the question.
Before we do,
yes.
And yes to the question, but before we do, let's substantiate that it is valuable. The Pokemon Company, the Apple Company, these are companies that make $1 million per employee per year. And they don't do it by having a product that cannot be competed with. There are lots of competitors in the cell phone market. There are lots of competitors in the trading card game market. There are lots of competitors in the TV show market. There's nothing inherently special about Apple, about Pokemon, that makes it so that they cannot be touched. They're successful because they've done some amazing things in creating a vision that their customers can buy into and making that unassailable. The vision, not the product, the vision. Now, you as a company, you could be hearing this and saying, I need to be better at creating a vision. Well, maybe, but it's the customers that chose to buy into it that makes that powerful. And that comes from community. And remember, one of these 5 elements of community, in fact, all 5 of them lead to that exact thing. Common language is that vision and how we talk about it. Common purpose is quite literally that vision. It's that thing that we're all working towards. In the Apple company's example, we're all working towards this ideal of some sort of perfect design that just works all the time. It's a great ideal. I'm totally behind that. Also, I'm not an Apple company customer. And I still think that's a great ideal. So I just wanted to take a moment to substantiate like the pursuit of that purpose and the way that they talk about it and the way that they get people to enroll in it, that heart, the way that they get people to show up and stand in line, a common project, in order to be a member of that community. And membership does have its perks. That right there is substantiation that this has value. And
so the value is more than just the warm and fuzzies. The value is profitability and growth.
Huge profitability. The companies that do a good job of building and sustaining community do far better than the others.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So now
they have more fun.
Now I get to ask you the question.
Yes.
So let's talk to you as the business owner, the owner of your own business. And I'd love to get a little deep with you on this, if you're willing to be so vulnerable, and share with us one, probably more than one, but I'm only asking for one mindset obstacle that you've personally had to overcome in order to get to where you are today.
All of them. Where's the all of the above button? Let's talk about, I was born with ADHD. I got diagnosed with that when I was, 10 or so. And the doctors were not wrong. As an adult, I can look back and be like, how dare they? How could they stick me with such a horrible label? They were not wrong. I could not stay focused in class if my life depended on it. Maybe if my life depended on it, but not under any other circumstances. And I was medicated. And they weren't wrong for that either. It didn't work well for me, but they weren't wrong. That was probably the only way to make me even remotely manageable in a classroom setting. Now, we know as adults now with a wider view on how education can happen, that maybe there was a different model that would have made sense for me, but I'm not sure we knew that when I was in elementary school. And as an adult, I've had to learn how to take that challenge, the chemical challenge of ADHD, the chemical challenge that causes me to be extremely distractible, and turn that into something that's really valuable. And ultimately, I think that's what all business owners do. They take something that's challenging and turn it into something that's valuable. And for me, what I've learned is being extremely distractible can also mean that when we have a mental list, I can change from one thing to another in that mental list with almost no effort at all, which is really cool. So what I've had to do is I've had to learn how to manage my mental list very, very, very carefully, so that when I'm switching from one item to another, because it's relatively free to switch from one item to another, it's something that was strategically appropriate for me from a longer view. And that's, boy, is that hard. It's hard to set up practices in your life that allow you to be good at managing your mental list, so that when your brain is like, all right, it's time to switch, and you don't really have any control over that, it just happens. When your brain is like, it's time to switch, the next thing on the list is also something that you want to be working on. It's something that you want to be focused on. It's something that you want to be distracted into.
I love that you share this particular issue, because there are other people who are listening who are still getting hung up on that particular issue. And it is challenging when people put a label on us. I've seen a lot of people use that as an excuse for setbacks and failure and status quo, when their heart is saying, no, 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 I want more. But you don't have to. And that's a really, really important point. You don't have to. I mean, there are people who they're born without limbs. And they decide, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do things that other people would say I cannot do, and they succeed. And this is the power of our choice, our ability to say, I do not have to let my setbacks define me. And that is an important mindset that needs to be adopted, embodied, embraced. Make it a part of your community.
Yeah. If you. It's been a harrowing journey, and by no means am I done. I have not reached any sort of destination, if there is any such thing. But I am turning it into something that serves me.
Awesome. Love it. All right, Lucas, how can our listeners connect with you? So you've got a podcast, you've got your consulting practice, got a lot of stuff going on. Let us know what are the ways that people can start to reach out to you and connect with you.
Best place to find me is on Instagram at Luke Root, Lucroot. Believe it or not, there are other Lucas Roots in the world. And when I went to Instagram to set myself up, at Lucas Root was already taken. So good for that guy. And the place to find me is at Luke Root. Instagram, I'm very active on. You can find me there. You can message me. I would love to hear from you. Also my website, lucasroot.com, or elementsofcommunity.us.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. You brought an element of community to my awareness that I hadn't previously considered before. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has learned a few things from this conversation.
So that means a lot to me. Thank you.
And of course, I've got to thank all of our listeners. We are doing this for you. If you have not already subscribed, please make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.